We are live. We are live on the Jeff Knows Me podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Jason Feifer. What is up, brother?
How are you? Thanks for having me.
We got the energy flowing right off the bat. So I love that. I love that. Where are you based out of right now?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
New York. New York. Have we always been in New York?
I have not always been in New York. I was born upstate New York and then grew up in Florida and then came back to New York. But the big change that we just made, my family and I, we used to live in a neighborhood called Park Slope. It is where all the action is, all the cool restaurants. We were just a couple blocks away from the Barclays Center where the Nets play. Totally loved it there. But we outgrew the space, and we struggled with what to do because we wanted more space, but that meant either leaving New York, which we didn't want to do, or moving further into Brooklyn, which basically the further you get from the hot areas with all the cool restaurants, the more space you can get.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But then you're further away from all the hot stuff, right? And I was like, do I want that? Why are we in Brooklyn if not to be like, world-class restaurants right around the corner? But we decided to make this change. We moved to a neighborhood called Kensington, which is a little further out. There's nothing kind of cool about it, but there are houses here, and we got a house. And we just decided, look, we need a change. We're going to take a risk. And we've been here for a month. And I have to tell you, it has made all the difference in the world. Like having the space for our kids. We have two little kids to run around.
How old are your little ones?
7 and 3. Okay. And having the space to move around is amazing. But also, this guy Warren Hatch, who's the CEO of a company called Good Judgment, once gave me this great advice about how to recognize whether something is important to you. He said, look, one of the challenges that we all have is that we have to filter out noise in order to get to signal, but we have a lot of noise even in our own heads. So he said, one of the great things you can do if you're trying to make a decision is to make a pro-con list, which we've all heard of, right? I've never really understood the point of pro-con lists, but until he told me this, he said, make a pro-con list, then put it away. Don't look at it. And then in like a week, make another pro-con list and then put that away and wait another week and then make another pro-con list. And then go look at all these pro-con lists and see which things consistently show up in pro or con and which things are little blips that just happen to be whatever you were feeling that day, because that's part of the noise, is that we sometimes can't identify the things that matter to us because we're so busy focused on the things that are just kind of passing through us or that we feel emotional about right now. So as I have come to learn, being around all those cool restaurants and stuff was not nearly as important to me as I thought that it was. And now we are in a more, it's not suburban, but it is quieter. I call it suburbs in the city. Yeah. And we got to walk a little further to get to interesting places, but something about the lifestyle mattered to me more. So you just never know until you put yourself out.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've been in suburbs I've been married for 19 years. I got a 14 and 16-year-old. And I grew up in the city in Toronto. We're from Toronto, Canada. I grew up in the city, downtown Toronto, for a majority of my life growing up. And I would not, once I'm in the suburbs, I would not move back to the city life. I like going there. I like parking my car. I like visiting the restaurants. Just like you said, the nightlife. Toronto's got a great atmosphere, great restaurant, great scenery, great multicultural scene. But coming back home to that quieter environment, it's there's something special about that, and seeing your kids growing up and having that different aspect. So I love that. But you're saying walking distance. So how far are you from originally? How far did you move away?
I mean, look, this is all relative to Brooklyn, right? So we moved about 2 miles, but in 2 miles in Brooklyn, everything changes.
Yeah.
And we are still we're around the corner, really. I can walk to a subway stop in 5 minutes. It's just a further out subway stop than I had ever, so it takes longer to get into Manhattan.
I'm talking about mine's is a 30-minute drive. So we got a different.
Oh yeah, no. But this is right. But it's all relative. Everything is scale. And I have, instead of having 20 amazing restaurants on my block, I walk a block and a half and I've got like 2 good restaurants, and then I got to walk another 5 minutes and then I got another 2. So no, I'm not in the suburbs by any means. I'm in a different kind of city environment, but this is a major change to how I've been living since 2008 when I moved to New York.
I love it. I love it. I love it. 2008. So were you when you moved to New York, were you married already?
No, no, I
No.
had actually just broken up with a very long-term girlfriend. I basically cut. I had a life in Boston. Um, I had a job I loved at Boston Magazine. I had all my college friends. I had this girlfriend I was living with for many years, and I got an opportunity to move to New York for Men's Health, to be an editor at Men's Health magazine, and I wasn't sure what to do. I It was my dream to move to New York, work in magazines. I mean, my dream has evolved considerably since then, but that's what it was at the time, and I. I had already sacrificed quite a lot to pursue career ambitions, and this girlfriend was along for a bunch of that ride, and she was not interested in moving to New York, and she told me, when does it end? When do I stop making the sacrifices for work? And I was really kind of stumped by this question, and I remember asking my parents. I was pacing around the streets of Boston on the phone with them, trying to decide what to do. Do I take this job, leave New York, leave everything I know, leave all my friends, um, and almost certainly end up breaking up with this girl? Uh, for what? When does it end? And my parents gave me this just tremendous advice. It's in the book that I wrote, Built for Tomorrow. I actually put it in the last chapter, which is that it never ends. They said it never ends.
No.
Right? It doesn't end. And yeah, sure, I could have stayed in Boston, they told me, and I could have been, I could have been satisfied for a while. Friends are still there. I got this job that I like, but then what? Right? Then what? I just cut myself off of major opportunities. There are much fewer media opportunities in Boston than there are in New York. And what then? And what I would end up doing is just resenting her and resenting everything. And so I had to go, and they were right. And that's what I did. And I hit reset in 2008. I met who became my wife the next year in 2009. And it's the greatest decision I ever made. I mean, both stories that I've told you right now so far are basically about staring down some kind of big change and then deciding to go for it and discovering that, like, there's more to gain. You will immediately recognize what you are going to lose. Or, like, loss is incredibly easy to see, but gain is much harder to see because you can't identify it immediately. It often comes out of something that you're not seeing, you can't anticipate. But the gain is the thing that will shape your life, will transform your life. And so I think people need to, this is what I've learned studying entrepreneurs. And it's the reason I wrote this book, Build for Tomorrow, because what I found is that people often hold themselves back because they can easily identify what they're going to lose. And they do not move forward because they don't have enough faith in what they're going to gain.
I love that. It's funny you're saying, I just did a post last week. I've been an entrepreneur for 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did a post last week on Instagram, a little story. And I'm talking about that. It means that fear is that one step at a time. It's that the fear of the unknown, right? And
yeah,
I'm a strong believer in living no regrets. I mean, you have one life, you try to live it to the fullest, and you're hoping that everybody around you will enjoy the ride with you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm lucky. My wife, very, very independent, very different than me. And I think that's why we match so nicely. She needs her 9 to 5 steady job, but she's never held anything back. She's just been supported from day one. So I think that's having that with you as a partner is so valid, right? So I love that. Growing up, let's talk about you growing up, like magazines, like editing, being an entrepreneur. Like, was it in your gene? Like, when did all this passion for all this stuff start?
Oh, no, I mean, no. The answer is, was it in my genes? No. These are all learned behavior. I have this belief that everybody has the exact same talent. Like, every human being has the exact same talent, and that talent is pattern matching. Everyone is really, like, as a human being, you are good at pattern matching. The thing that is different about us all is that we all are good at matching different patterns. And so I realized pretty early. I mean, I wouldn't have said it like this in high school, but in high school, I started writing for local magazines, and I created a blog before the word blog existed. Shout out to members.aol.com if anyone remembers that. And what I realized I was doing back then, which I now consider to be one of my core skill sets, is that I was able to see a piece of communication and then understand how it was built and then repeat that. Right? Like, what is the structure of this writing? Why does this work? I mean, it was very raw when I was 16, right? But I've gotten a lot better at it. But I understand. I can watch something and say, oh, I see how the narrative arc of this was created. And I can see what the writer was doing. It's not magic. It's just, like what I found I'm able to do in the same way that somebody else can walk into a business and say, aha, I see why this is working and this is not working and what you should do here, right? Let's just, whatever. It's the pattern that comes natural. So when I was young, I really gravitated towards writing. I got attention for my writing. People started reading my blog when I was in high school, and I started to get free concert tickets and CDs because I was writing for local music magazines. It was exciting. I went to college and I didn't know what I was going to do with this skill. I tried a whole bunch of things out. Some of them were very bad. I was not a good fiction writer. I was not a good screenwriter. I was a pretty good journalist. So I took over the student magazine, and then I got into newspapers when I graduated. And that's where I learned, like, what the most important lesson I think of my career was in the very beginning, which was I took this job at a tiny community newspaper, 6,000 circulation. It was called the Gardner News in North Central Massachusetts, and 6,000 circulation in 2002. I don't know what it is now, or even if it exists. And I was writing about nothing, right? Because nothing was happening. I was writing about the middle school dances and the local diners, right? Nothing is happening. And I eventually I got really bitter being there, and because I had these larger ambitions, I couldn't really define them, but I also had no access to anybody who could help me with those ambitions. And I just wanted to write for large places. Maybe I wanted to be at the New York Times, the Washington. I didn't know, just bigger than this. And then my boss saw that I was bitter and that I was making everybody else unhappy, and basically told me, you got to like shape it up or I'm going to fire you. And I realized two things. Thing number one was, if I was better than this place, then I wouldn't be here. Right? Like, let's be humble and recognize that there are things to learn and that there are steps to take. And number two, that if I wanted to work at a very high level, well, what I can't do is sit around waiting for someone to recognize me. Like, I think that right, I was feeling like, these people aren't giving me a chance to shine, and therefore the New York Times isn't recognizing me. As if the New York Times would ever call me up out of the blue and be like, kid, we loved that story about the middle school dance. We are bringing you up. You're going to cover the White House now. Or like, that wasn't going to happen. Right? So instead, I needed to go to them. That was the lesson. Go to them. Never sit around and wait to be recognized. Never assume that the thing that you're doing is by itself going to attract the attention and grow into what it is that you want. No, you go to them. You go to them over and over and over again. It doesn't matter your level. So I quit that job and I sat in my bedroom for 9 months in a dumpy apartment with some college friends next to a graveyard. And I cold pitched newspapers and magazines and whatever. And cold pitch, in this case means I come up with a story idea, track down an editor I've never met, and then send them an email and hope that they care. And, most of the time they didn't, but occasionally they did. I got a story in the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Associated Press, and it started to build my career. And I have taken that to heart, and it is what I continue to do today, which is never settle for the thing that you're already doing. To focus exclusively on the thing that you're already doing is to only be qualified to do the thing you're already doing. Instead, go to them, whatever that means. Go chase the opportunities that are available to you that nobody is asking you to do. Pursue the new skill sets, the new drives, the new insights that are, again, I'm going to repeat it, available to you but nobody is asking you to do them, right? Like we sit around doing the things that people are asking of us, and that's fine. But those people, if they're asking you to do something, it is because you serve a role for them and they would like you to serve that role forever. Right. Like you're a convenient role server. And I don't want to be a convenient role server. I wanted to build something for myself and I didn't know what it was. And so, I mean, to your other question about entrepreneurship, that came much later. That really didn't come until I spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs at Entrepreneur Magazine, that I really started to redefine my understanding of myself. But for a long time, what I did was I knew I have a skill set. I have to figure out how it's useful. I have to figure out how to refine it. And I have to relentlessly go to people and show that I can do work at increasingly higher levels with increasingly more opportunity.
It's a constant pursuit of improvement. I mean, that's essentially what it is. You're constantly trying to improve yourself at a constant basis. From there, you are now back in New York. You met your wife. From the time you met your wife to you get married, what are you looking at timeline?
Like two-ish years.
2-ish years. So in that process, when did Entrepreneur Magazine enter the picture?
After I got married in 2011, I got the job at Entrepreneur in 2015. I became editor-in-chief in 2016. The first job was executive editor. I was the number 2. And so by that point, we already had one kid. And I had no idea how to do this job. No idea how to do this job. I was running on instinct. And the one of the first insights that guided me was, so here I am. There's this brand. It's called Entrepreneur. It has a lot of opportunity. It's also been underutilized for years. Back in 2015, 2016, it's just our website wasn't as robust. The magazine had the same format as it had for years and years. It was just kind of old. It was like talking about tax tips and stuff. And just the brand had a very narrow definition of its audience, small business owners.
Yeah.
And I realized, wait a second, we're actually staring down an amazing opportunity right now, because people across a very broad spectrum of experience, both work experience and life experience, call themselves entrepreneurs. They are kids building profiles on Instagram. They are people selling things on eBay, and they are people running venture-backed companies in Silicon Valley. So what do all of these people have in common? And is it possible to be relevant to them all? We had a lot of conversations about that internally. That was the big puzzle that I wanted to solve. And what we came to was, what they all have in common? The experience of entrepreneurship. That's what they all have in common. The experience of feeling lonely and crazy and problem solving your way through walls, of like trying something despite having absolutely no roadmap for it. That is the thing that unites all these people together. And if you speak to that, you're doing something that other people aren't, right? Like our competitors are not doing that. Our competitors are doing tax tips. And so why don't we live in that space? Not exclusively. We still do plenty of service, and you can get your 7 steps to market something on our website. But I want that to be the core, the heart of the brand. I want that to be the thing that people recognize, so that they say, this is for me, because I'm an entrepreneur and this is called Entrepreneur. And so that means that we have to define what entrepreneur is. I started to use this line, which is, an entrepreneur is someone who makes things happen for themselves. And I started running these stories of people just like pouring their hearts out about their challenges and how they overcame them. And people respond, man. They respond, because that's what they're dealing with. Everybody who pursues something for themselves is gonna go through this crazy thing where they are feeling very alone, but they're experiencing the same thing as everyone else who does this. They're alone together. And so if you can send up the bat signal that, hey, over here we're talking about that, then they come. And they really appreciate it. So that was, once I figured that out, I understood how to do the job and what it would take. And then the next part of the journey really was figuring out, well, who am I? Because now I understood how to do the job, but no, who am I to these people? Because they would people would understand me as someone I wasn't.
So who are you?
um, yeah, I was pausing to see where you would go with it. Uh, well, so in the very beginning, I was a media guy, right? Like, so the average entrepreneur, I thought they would understand me as a media guy. I'm an editor. I make a media product, but they didn't understand me as that. They would have me on their podcasts and they would or whatever, they're at their events, and they would introduce me as, oh, well, we got Jason Feifer here. He's a thought leader in entrepreneurship, and he's going to tell us all the. And I was like, oh, no, 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 right? Like I don't want to misrepresent myself. That's not who I am. Right? Like I come from, I worked in men's health, I'm not a thought leader, but uh, but that, as I would try to roll that back, as I would say, well, actually, I think of myself as a journalist and a really a storyteller. It was they didn't understand what the hell I was talking about. I was basically like destroying the reason that they had me on their show. And as I told my wife this problem that I was having at once, and she said, well, if they want you to be a thought leader, then just be a thought leader. And I realized that the only difference between a thought leader and not a thought leader is that the thought leader is willing to call themselves a thought leader. And so I thought, well, okay, well, what is it that people want from me? And like, who do they think I am? And part of the answer to that question came from listening to the questions that people asked me, because what you will find if you listen to questions that you get is that what people are really doing is they are telling you what they think your value is to them. And if you see patterns in that, then you can start to understand how the role that you fill in their lives. And so as I would go to events and I would meet readers and whatever, people kept asking me the same question, which is, what are the qualities of a successful entrepreneur? I got that question so often. And I realized, aha, they see me as a pattern matcher. To go back to pattern matching, but like they see me as someone who has access to a lot of people and can therefore see the patterns in what drives all these people, which is true. That is exactly the role that I occupy. I get to talk to everybody. I do. I interview A-list celebrities, global celebrities for the magazine, as well as random entrepreneurs who are just running interesting businesses that you've never heard of. I do it all. So, okay, let me see if I can figure that out. And the more time I spent in that, the more time I realized, okay, well, the thing that I am most interested in, that I most relate to, but that I also think is most critical, is adaptability. Like the ability for people to adapt to changing circumstances, I think is the driving force of success. And if I could, and I see that in myself too. So let me lean into that. Let me understand that really clearly, what people are doing, how they're thinking. And also let me open up my own understanding of myself and my career, because fine, I have not built a company, but what I have done is that I have taken a lot of risks in a career, and I have kind of changed myself quite a lot. And I've gone through this emotional journey that I know entrepreneurs go through too. And that's where I can relate to them. So why don't I own the difference here, but also not be afraid of the overlap? And that took years. I have compressed years worth of knowledge and trying to understand myself, and as I understand myself in a professional context, in relation to this audience, into 2 minutes of ranting here. But that's what I learned, and once I figured that out, I realized there's just a massive opportunity in front of me.
So going from that, and that was a lot. So in the end of the day, you're coming down to, I use it as a simple word, is pivot. As an entrepreneur, you pivot. You have those peers you go through. When you started looking at yourself, did you start almost warping yourself and understanding that where you are and where you're going, those characteristics of an entrepreneur are very valid to who you are as well?
Yeah, because here's the thing. There are two ways to look at what it means to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Way number one is that you are in a world of tactics, right? You are in a world of, how do I grow this business? Of how do I solve this particular marketplace challenge? Of, everything down to how do I price a product, to how do I figure out the logistics?
Yeah.
But those are, in a way, the easy parts of it. it's not to say that they are easy to figure out, but what it is to say is that there's a world of research and best practices to follow.
100%.
And there's someone who you can hire to figure out pretty much every single one of those problems. But then there is stuff like, how do I get up in the morning and not just be crushingly afraid? Right? How do I grapple emotionally with that I have been building towards something for the last year and now it has to be radically different? These are things like, how do I, I don't know. I literally just got off the call before with you. It was a friend of mine who runs a beverage company, and I've known him for years. I've seen many ups and many downs, and they are going through a down right now. And so he brought his team together, and we had a 30-minute call, and I basically told them how to think through what feels like an existential problem, right? Like what are you facing right now, and how can you shrink it down to, it's a big problem but it's just a problem, right? Like problems are just problems. And because here's the thing, like that's the thing that you can't hire someone to do, right? That's the thing, and that's the thing that I can excel at, because what I am good at is people. Right. I'm good at understanding people and understanding what they've learned and then figuring out how to take that lesson and like turn it around and deliver it to someone else so that it's meaningful to them too. And so I started to just figure out where the intersections were between the people that I was meeting and the things that I have experienced myself, and come up with these like lessons and understandings of what they're doing so that I can share it with others. And look, somebody else, I'll always say this, people hire me now. I travel North America. I was just in Toronto actually. And I, these companies hire me for a lot of money to go speak to their executive teams or their clients or whatever, and talk to them about how to like think more adaptively to recognize that moments of great change are opportunities. And, and it's, I always open up and I say, I am not here to tell you how to run your business, because you know how to do that a lot better than I do. Right. Like, let's just get that right out of the way. Right. Like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I cannot tell you what to do to go from a $10 million business to a $100 million business, but I can tell you how to think your way through it. Right. Like, I can tell you what you need emotionally and mentally to do that. And look, I've picked up a lot of tactics along the way, and I can tell you what's worked for a lot of different people. But what I really understand is people. And I will tell you, like, that is my answer to imposter syndrome. Because I felt a lot of imposter syndrome at the beginning. Who am I? Why would you listen to me? It doesn't seem to be a reason why you would listen to me. Entrepreneurs who are building businesses, and I have not like built and sold a business. I have a business now. I have a media company. It drives revenue because I have a whole bunch of revenue driving products outside of entrepreneur. But like, that's different from, I built a beverage brand and I, sold it to Unilever, right? Like those are different things. So, I was very, very afraid of not being taken seriously and of not knowing what to tell people that would be meaningful, until I figured out I need to turn what I feel like is a deficit into an asset. And then I need to lean very heavily into the places that I find intuitive, and that also happens to be a white space because people aren't getting enough of it from others. And once I figured that out, I realized that I'm not afraid to talk to people anymore, because anything that I don't know, I'm just going to say I don't know. And I'm going to tell you what I have learned, because I've learned a lot.
Yeah, and there's a process to everything, and I love that the white space and honesty. I mean, people can relate to that, right?
Yeah.
Quick question. This is something I think you've answered prior. Entrepreneurs,
Yes.
you had said prior about something about in regards to skills that could be taught. Are you a strong believer that anybody could be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
You don't believe that natural hustle or drive has to be in you to succeed over the long haul?
I think that there are people who might more naturally choose to be entrepreneurs. but and that's not to say that everybody should be an entrepreneur, right? I mean,
Yeah, of course.
right. There's a big difference between can you learn to be an entrepreneur and should everybody be an entrepreneur? Because most people shouldn't. It's an incredibly hard journey. If you could do anything else, go do that because whatever that other thing is going to be easier. But if you want it, or if you are forced into it, because there's a whole world. There's a economic term is oh, what is it? It's such a good one too. Necessity entrepreneurs. Necessity entrepreneurs are
I've heard
basically
that before. Yeah.
yeah. So people who turn to entrepreneurship basically because they have no other economic opportunity.
Yeah.
We ran a great feature about just like that very concept once. It was focused on a guy who got laid off from a manufacturing plant in the Midwest somewhere, and there's nothing else for him to do. Like, no, we could not use his skill set anywhere else. So he opened up a bicycle repair shop, and it's and it's been going through this challenge of building it, but he's like getting there and he's learning it and he's growing. So like some people have a natural tolerance for risk that's higher than others, no question. But what I have found, look, to me, a defining moment, which really taught me a lot about this, the answer to this question, at least as far as I'm concerned, is so I've mentioned this book, Build for Tomorrow, a couple of times, but so this is a book that's like it's a business book. It's for anybody going through any kind of challenges in their career. It's not my first book. It is my first book with my name on it by itself. But back in 2018, I wrote a romantic comedy with my wife. It got published, a major publisher. We sold the TV rights. It was fun. And when this, and I was an entrepreneur at the time. And when this romantic comedy came out, I got two kinds of reactions depending on the person. My media friends, they all said, "Congratulations, it's so exciting. You wrote a novel with your wife and it's coming out. Wow, so cool." Entrepreneurs, well, they said, "Oh, that's interesting. What are you going to do with it?" And what I realized was that the reason entrepreneurs were reacting that way was because to an entrepreneur, the only reason to do something is because it is the foundation upon which the next thing will be built. And that's not how most people think. Yeah. Most people think in a way in which I now call horizontal thinking. Do something, move along. Do something else, move along. Do something else, move along. Entrepreneurs think vertically. They stack. The reason to do something is because it is the foundation upon which the next thing will be built. Doesn't mean that you're going to go in a straight line. Doesn't mean that you know what the plan is, but it does mean that you're going to filter opportunities and actions based on what you think they can open up for you next. And that is not a natural way of thinking. But I will tell you something, as a guy who did not think that way and then has spent years and years talking to people who do think that way, is that I totally absorbed it, right? Like it completely changed the way that I think about my own work and the opportunities that I pursue. And like the way in which I think about like framing myself and everything. So and I other people are better at it than me and more clear-eyed about it than me, but that's why I talk to them and get advice. But I learned that. It wasn't born with that. I learned it. And as a result, I have changed my career, right? And I'm still at Entrepreneur Magazine, which, to be frank, or to be clear and frank, I don't own. It's not my company. So I'm just an employee. I'm renting this great title of editor-in-chief, but it could go to somebody else. But I am also very actively building my own stuff on the side, right? Podcasts and books and speaking and all sorts of other stuff. And I'm only doing that because I spent all this time with entrepreneurs and I recognized the thing that they recognize and I started to apply it to myself.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm yeah, I mean, that question goes back and forth. A lot of people debate it, and it's a question of I'm a strong believer in that initial hustle. Sometimes it's got to be pulled out of you. Just when I'm hearing your story about you taking an opportunity and moving to New York and taking an opportunity and seeing where other opportunities when you're working for that local magazine, I think it was always in you, and it just, you maybe didn't have the indirect mentoring from a younger age to push it out of you, but I think it was still already in you. I've been self-employed since I started my first company at 17. I've been self-employed really since I was 19. I'm 45, right? I've never taken a check from nobody. I've always found a way to hustle and make my own money and build my own thing. So, but it's that mindset. I love what you said with the stacking, because that is subconsciously what you're trying to do. You're always trying to look at everything and see another opportunity from it. So I love that you say that. It's so, so true. I'm going to throw the question totally different direction. Fatherhood. Sure. What does fatherhood mean to you?
Complicated. Exhausting. Transformative. I'll be on, I mean, as a guy with a 7 and a 3-year-old, they're a lot of work. So I'll just be frank with you. Like, I don't romanticize it. Like, I recognize the like incredible weight of it, and I love my kids, but it's a lot of work. It's just, I kind of process it in my head as work, right? Just to say again, I just want to, like, I hate talking about parenting. I actually hate the subject of parenting because every parent is so judgy. Right. And like, I remember walking down the street when I was like when my kids were like, when my first kid was like an infant or whatever. And maybe it would be like a little chilly and I didn't put a hat on him. And like somebody was going to come up and be like, that baby should have a hat. Right. And it's like, hey, back off. Right. Like, back off. So I cannot stand how people react to the subject, which is why I like want to caveat every damn thing I say. But yeah, I mean, look, it's like, I think that anybody who just talks about how parenthood is just like nothing but like transformative love, which fine, that too, but is I think like kind of afraid of talking about that it is also very hard. And I, as a guy who has built a career now about talking about things that are hard and being like open about that, right? Like, I think that entrepreneurs should talk about how hard it is, even though this is what they choose to do every day. Right. It's like talking about how hard it is helps you do the thing that you want to do every day. I think people should be like that about parenthood too.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. I'm just laughing because you're very blunt and honest, and I love that, because you don't usually get that answer. And
it's because people are afraid. People are afraid.
Yeah, it is hard work. Don't ever anybody out there equivalent is full of shit, right? It is a lot of work, and even my journey, like, I won't get into detail, but I had a son that went through a lot of physical difficulties, mentally, physically, from a very young age. So I dedicated a lot of time, and I still do to this day. He's 14, to get him to where he is right now at this moment, and it's rewarding. I think that's the biggest thing, is as your kids get older and they become more independent, and you teach them independence. Like, I'm a strong believer from day one. My daughter's 16, my son's 14. They both clean, they both cook. My daughter's 16. She's working at a farm. Like, I got her a job at a local farm. Like, you're teaching them independence. She doesn't have to work. Financially, we're done okay for ourselves. But it's a situation of teaching them independence, teaching them how to be young adults from a very young age. Don't cradle them. Let them go out. Let them do things. Let them adventure on their own. Let them learn their own lessons. Be there to obviously catch them if they fall, but at the same time, teach them it's okay to fail. It's okay to learn and progress from there, right? So it is hard. It is hard, and I love that. I loved your answer there. I was laughing, I was smiling the whole time, because it's bluntly honest.
Yeah, can I say it's funny because that is actually often that's often the response I get. I mean, like even just talking about parenthood with friends, is that I'll start talking that way, and they'll start laughing because they know it's true, but nobody else says it. And so I think there's value in that. There's value in that, right? Like, why talk? Certainly talk like, like what we're doing now is we are talking for consumption of others. And which means that, like, somebody is listening to this right now, and they've chosen to spend their time, their valuable time, listening to us. They should be hearing something that is thought-provoking. There's no other reason to listen to something. And so like, what does it get you, person listening to this right now, if I just say I love my kids? I mean, obviously I love my kids, but like, that doesn't add anything. But saying something that's a little challenging, maybe that does add something. This just seems more valuable to me. That doesn't mean you like go around like I hate people who just go on Twitter to be like provocative for the sake of it. Like I'm not being provocative right now. I'm just talking about like an honest truth of an experience, right? But like it's also to me weird that like saying parenthood is hard is something that like is so rarely heard that people laugh when they hear it. Like that there's something wrong about that, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very open about my story and the struggles we've been through. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Your wife, what does your wife mean to you?
What does my wife mean to me? Oh, sorry, because at first I heard what does she do, and I was like, she's a writer. What does she mean to me? I mean, she is the uh, there was a there's some movie I can't remember what it was. And I this is like an anecdote I'm kind of trying to cobble together in my head right now, so it's not like a clear. But there was some movie I remember years and years ago I watched when I was a kid, and there's a scene where like a child asks a father or something about how to like pick the right person, and 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 he says something much better than basically it's someone who you can like dig a foxhole with and then like stay inside with, right? Like that, like what you need is a partner who you can like um build a like defense with against all the challenges of the world, right? And that I think that's true, right? Like that's not the only thing, obviously, but I'm just trying to like search for something is something like insightful. I mean, what does my wife mean to me? She is my like partner. She is the person I spend most of my time with. She is an amazing mother and writer, and like person who I share a life with. And I like this just it's I picked the right person. But when you ask a question like that, it's funny. What I always think about, just to go back to like how I think I am performing for someone else's time right now, is I go back to I watched when I was in college. I went to see Ira Glass, who's the creator of This American Life, the radio show, speak, and he said a couple things during that talk that I like imprinted on my brain and have shaped a couple of the things that I like always think about. But one of them was that, he's a storyteller and he tells other people's stories. And he said, somebody had asked somebody, he'd like just gotten engaged or something like that. And somebody raised their hand. And they're like, are you going to do a story on This American Life about like your own engagement? And he said, no, because there's nothing unique about it. Like, he's like sometimes you have to recognize that like the things that matter the most to you are also just really common. And right. And like they're not, there's nothing like they are unique to you because it's your version of it, right? It's like you found someone that you love and then you love them. But that's not unique. That's a thing that everybody experiences. And like a good story is actually based on something that is unusual, but that contains a lesson that helps you look at something in your own life a little bit differently. And that's true. And so, like forevermore, I heard that and I was like, that's true. A lot of the things that I experience in my own life are not interesting to other people because they're just so common, right? I mean, what is the story? The story is that I like met my wife on OkCupid and we dated for a couple of years and then we got married and we had 2 kids and we have a wonderful life, right? But like that's great, but I think that's pretty boring for somebody to hear about. So I it's like when you ask me, I'm like, what can I say that's unique? What do I have that is going to help somebody look at something in their own life that's different? That's how I always think. It's fun. This interview is funny because you just keep asking these personal questions and I have programmed myself to think nobody cares about me, right? But they don't. There's no reason.
I think people find value in hearing other people's journey, and I think people find value in hearing other people's where they can relate to a story where they're. And one thing about you, I'm gonna tell you this right off the bat, Jason, is You have a gift, and I don't know if this is something you were born with, something you've learned over the years in the industries you've been in. You have a gift for storytelling. You turn everything into a story,
Oh, I'm very
which
aware of
is
that. Yes.
very entertaining,
Yeah.
very. It adds a light to everything. So
So
go continue. Sorry.
no. I just want to, before you like go further, I just want to clarify, like, I'm not saying nobody cares out of me out of some kind of insecurity. Like, that's not the place it comes from. The place that it comes from is that I make a magazine and I know that nobody wants to read a magazine. I wrote a book and I know that nobody wants to read a book. I make podcasts. Nobody wants to listen to podcasts. What they want is the value contained within. Like, everybody is building everyone has a project, and that project is themselves. And it should be. Like, that it should be, because that's not, nobody else's project is going to be you. So your project better be you. And that doesn't mean that, like, oh, we don't care about other people and everybody's self-serving. It doesn't mean that. But, like, look, when I read something, I'm reading it because I want it to add something to me, right? I want some kind of insight, or I want some lesson, or I want something. That's the only reason I'm reading something, or whatever, engaging with something. It could also just be entertainment, right? I mean, I watch Game of Thrones. That doesn't teach me, or now House of Dragon. Like, it doesn't teach me anything about my life, but it allows me to escape. There's, like, it provides something to me. I'm aware of what it provides to me. So I tell this. I mean, I tell this in talks a lot whenever people ask me about communications, which is that I tell people, I'm like I'll be standing in front of hundreds of people, and I'll say, like, all of you, you're all sitting here and you're listening to me, but you don't care about me. There's no reason for you to care about me. You should care about you. Like, you should care about you. And the only reason that you're sitting here is because I am going to say something, hopefully, that is going to be useful to you. Like, that's why you're here. And so I think that good communications is about being aware of what your audience needs all the time. And recognizing that, like, to the degree that you talk about yourself, it's because you're a stand-in for them, or because you get to control your story in a way in which you're driving towards experience, towards lessons that people can hear and say, aha, I understand how that's useful to me. Right. So I have spent a very long time drilling that into myself. And it's not to say that, like, I will be open about anything. I'm not afraid. This isn't like I won't tell you about my life. I'll tell you about my life. I don't care, but I just don't think that it's interesting. Like, I think that that's why when I listen to people talk, it's why I actually don't listen to most podcasts, because I actually don't really care about what other people are saying about themselves. I do care about what they're saying about, like, things that they've learned that can be useful to me, So anyway, that's like a whole long thing, but I guess back to your actual question, which was about my wife. I mean, my wife is wonderful, but I think I don't know what I would tell you that that would not be either a description of the relationship that you have, or a description of the relationship that you wish that you had.
I'm gonna disagree with a little something you said there. So I do think people listen to podcasts, and I do think people read books. Is not only the informative side, is they try to turn those moments they're experiencing through reading or listening, and relate it to stories of their own life, and give.
Sure, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, you are saying that. Okay.
I'm just saying that nobody, right? Like, okay, here, we'll go back to it this way. When years and years and years ago, I applied for a job back when BuzzFeed was, like, growing at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
BuzzFeed had started this. They had hired a long form editor whose job was to, like, assign and edit long form story. Long form is what magazines speak for, like 3,000, 4,000 word stories.
Yes, yeah.
And so they had hired this long form editor named Steve, and then he was looking for another editor to join his team. And they had a section in BuzzFeed that you could find, like, at the tab at the very top, and it was called, like, it was either called long form or something like it, right? And we were talking during the interview. I ended up not getting the job, but we were talking during the interview, and he said, we've been thinking internally about what to do with our long form things, because nobody comes to BuzzFeed and is like, what I really want is a long story. Like, nobody's like, what I really need right now is just, like, 3,000 words on something. That's not how people think, right?
100%, yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like, no, but I don't think anyone is just like, I just feel like a magazine right now. Like that's not it. The magazine is maybe for people who read magazines, it is a convenient delivery mechanism for whatever information is in there that they want, right? So like my wife subscribes to Real Simple, not because she likes a magazine, but because she likes design ideas, and she likes, like that's why and it just happens to be a useful way in which it shows up at home and she can flip through it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love podcasts, but the podcasts that I listen to are all kind of they're all going to teach me something. And again, it's not because I'm like, I need a podcast. I just need somebody in my ear right now, right? It's because I want to learn something for me. So that's what I mean. Like, it's not about the medium, it's about the value. And the people prefer things in different values. So like, that's when I then apply it to myself. And I'm like, okay, I'm a guy that people, my family and my friends care about me, but the average person, if they're going to spend 1 hour of their entire life with me, which is going to be a lot of people, right? You're going to hear me on one podcast maybe, or I'm going to be speaking to your company for 1 hour. You're going to spend your whole life, you're going to spend 1 hour with me. And that's not a deep investment in an individual. But if I can tell you something that you can remember for a long time, in the way that I went and I saw Ira Glass speak when I was in college. I don't know Ira. I've never met him. But I saw him speak for an hour, and he said a couple things that lodged in my brain and helped shift the way that I think. Well, boy, that's value. Like, that's value. And I will forever be grateful to Ira Glass for that.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's looking for. I agree with that. I mean, I think there's two sides of it. I think there are moments for individuals. It matters to the individual. Some people are just so busy with their schedule, busy with their lives. And when they do have half an hour, they do want to inform themselves and educate themselves and learn. And then there's other people that have an hour drive home and they just don't want to listen to music, and they will slap on a podcast just to relate to a story or hear a story or hear somebody's life. I mean, I think there's both sides of it. I mean, we've had over 2 million downloads in 12 months. There's a reason for that. There's people listening.
It's incredible.
It's a situation of understanding of what the audience is and what they're looking for. And I think what my niche is just bring interesting individuals on and letting them hear their story. And they could be from all walks of life, right? I'm interviewing a kid tomorrow that at 21 years old dropped out of college and put in his head he wanted to become a professional soccer player, and spent 2 years journeying and recording himself, and just signed a pro contract 750 something days into the deal, and he made a commitment after 2 years he was going to quit. So it's just hearing people's stories like that, I think are inspiring to a lot of people. And listen to your story. I mean, what you've achieved. Now we're going to talk about your book now, but there's a lot of value into what you've done. And other people that maybe some kids out there listen to the podcast tomorrow or in the next week when we release it, and is a young inspiring writer and looks at you as inspiration of what could be achieved, right? So I think there's value in everything we do with that. Your book, when did you take pen to paper and start writing your book?
Wait, before I answer that, I'll just say I think that was a great thoughtful response. And please don't take anything that I've said here as like challenging you or anything, right? Like, I never do.
I love these conversations, right?
Yeah, it's fun. It's sort of almost fun to get meta on it, especially as a guy who's in communications. I sort of like to talk about communications, and oftentimes I find it interesting to just like capture, all right, we've spent enough time like doing the thing, now let's talk about the thing that we're doing, because actually that's pretty interesting too. Right, so anyway, so okay, so I wrote this book between January of 2021 and September of 2021. How do you write a book while having a full-time job and a whole bunch of side gigs and 2 children that you love even though they're difficult, and a wife that you love even though you give a very long rambly answer when Jeff on a podcast asked about it. The answer is you break it up into a million pieces. That's how you do it. Like, you don't think about it as one big project, because that is overwhelming. You think about it as how do I just tackle a ton of tiny, completely possible projects. And so anyway, the answer was I devoted an hour to 2 hours every morning for 9 months to writing the book. That's how I wrote a book.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I've went through the same process the year prior, 2020, when the pandemic pretty much hit. I wrote a book called Entrepreneurial Dad back there. And it was the same process. It was just I would dedicate 45 minutes to an hour every day and just put it aside and just whatever rod. I mean,
Yeah.
some days it was blank, some days was filled with ideas, some days it was just editing. You just put as much down as you can and move on, and just have that slot in there and move on from it. So I love that. So the book came out. Was it self-published? Published?
No, it was probably, came out on Penguin Random House. Yeah.
Okay,
Major
perfect,
publisher.
perfect. So books released. You obviously started. I want to talk about that. When I saw your. It was it. Is it New York Square time when you actually had the billboard, the little
Oh yeah,
billboard?
yeah. Times Square. Yeah,
Times
yeah.
Square. So I
New York
saw
Times
that.
Square. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I think that was
Sure.
so cool. And I saw your thing and you're going up to people and talking. I saw your post. I was laughing because I was originally, just for our audience to know, Jason was supposed to be on our podcast, and unfortunate on my side happened. So this is obviously delayed about 6 weeks from where it should be.
Hmm.
How when you did that, what was your mindset when you did that, and your experience? Obviously, you're doing it to get as much media as possible, and obviously create as much buzz. But that's fun. Let's talk about that, the experience.
Oh yeah. So what you're describing is that I got the book on NASDAQ, big, obviously, financial company. So NASDAQ has a billboard in Times Square in Manhattan, yeah. And I used this connection that I had developed years earlier and asked them if they would put the billboard or the book cover up on the billboard, and which is a thing that they do occasionally for authors. And they said yes. And so I thought, okay, well, every time that I see someone do this, I just see the same thing, which is just a photo in front of the billboard. They send a photographer out there and they'll take a nice photo of you, and it's really cool. You're standing in Times Square and this is billboard. It's a dream. But I was like, what else could I do? This is happening. I'm going to take the photo, and then what am I going to do? Just kind of look at it until it disappears? Like that, that seems, I think the thrill of it will wear off after a second. So what else can I make? And I thought, well, what would be funny is to just kind of run around giving people high fives. Like that's it, like this, like not any more complicated than that. Like what would happen? I just sort of ran around and I told people, that's my book. Will you give me a high five? And so that's what I did. And I had this guy film it and follow me around. And it was really funny because you had people in New York who are used to being accosted, probably to try somebody to sell something to them. So they wouldn't even engage with me, even though all I was asking for was a high five. Then there were people who were really into it and gave me a high five. What I didn't expect were the number of people who wanted to talk. Right. So I would come up to them and I'd be like, that's my book. Give me a high five. And they'd be like, what's your book? Tell me about the book. And I'll be like, it's a book about how to be adaptable. Give me a high five. And he's like, oh, did it just come out? Right. And there was one woman who's like, how can I buy it? And so that I didn't expect. And that was a problem because you're not actually up there for very long.
How long are you up there for?
5 minutes. That's all you get. Yeah. You get 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Because, it's basically just for the photo, right? Like they're putting it up so you can put it on social media. Yeah. And so it's only 5 minutes. And so if somebody tries to talk to me for 30 seconds to a minute, you have eaten up a significant amount of time that I am. And so I didn't expect that, but it was a joy. Like, it's a joy. If you feel joy, other people want to join you in that.
100%.
It's like, that's it. People are walking around all day, basically like looking for joy. And so if you've got it, they want it. And I always say, sorry to interrupt you. I always say smile. It's a simple smile, right? A smile is contagious, and you always hear that, right? Right.
Sorry, continue. Yeah.
No. So anyway, so that's what I did. It was super fun.
I love it. In your book, give me one section or one lesson in there that your audience will really connect to or enjoy, that you had a passion for, that in that chapter or something. So give me one part of the book that gives me a lesson or something that I could really relate to.
Okay. Yeah. So something that I learned that I've done this for myself. I've discovered that entrepreneurs, I think really smart entrepreneurs do it too, is that they recognize that there has to be a part of them that does not change even in times of change. And because look, we're going to go through so many challenges and changes in our life and our career, and sorry, I just this is what happens when you're remote. Uh, uh, that's real world, guys. It's just I got a message that I had to respond to. So look, when we go through change, when our lives or our work is disrupted, the reason I think that it often feels so scary is because we ourselves feel disrupted. We identify with the product of our work. We identify with the thing that we make. We identify with the thing that we do every day, with the role that we occupy. And so when that changes, we feel like our identity has changed too. I started, as I told you an hour ago, as a newspaper reporter, and when I realized I didn't want to be in newspapers anymore, it was actually kind of hard. It was hard to leave. I mean, I told you that job of quitting the first job, but I stayed, and then I got to this other job and I stayed for a couple of years longer, even as I freelanced on the side. And the idea of leaving that job actually became challenging, even though I loved being a newspaper reporter. The problem was I hated the job. I hated it. It didn't pay me that well. The hours were terrible, but I stayed for too long because I thought of myself as a newspaper reporter. It's very, very hard to walk away from your identity.
Yeah.
And what I've realized that other people do incredibly well, either on an individual level or as a company, is that they come up with this thing about them that does not change in times of change. What is the value that they have? What is the mission that they serve that you can frame in a single sentence in a really short way? Like, well, imagine if you had to define yourself, but you can't use any words that relate to the things that you do every day that are changeable. What does that mean? That's very abstract. So like this, I stopped thinking of myself as a newspaper reporter or a magazine editor or whatever, and I started to say this: I tell stories in my own voice. That's the sentence I use for myself. Now I wouldn't use that if somebody came up to me at a party and asked what I did, because that's obnoxious. Like, what does that mean? But for myself, I tell stories in my own voice. Stories, right? You zeroed in on it. That's what I'm good at. I recognize that. But it doesn't have to just be like magazine stories or podcast stories or books or whatever, right? Because any of that is changeable. I could get fired today from Entrepreneur, and then I don't have a magazine to work for anymore. I better not define myself as a magazine editor because it's too easily changeable, too disrupted. So instead, I tell stories. I can control that in my own voice, setting the terms for how I'm going to work. Right. I've reached a point in my career. I'm not going to get subsumed into an organization. I am only doing things because it is resting upon my abilities alone. That's what I'm interested in. So I talked to Gary Vaynerchuk about this. He said he has two words that guides everything that he does: practical optimism. Everything has to be filtered through practical optimism. I remember talking to the CEO of Foodsters. They make baking mixes and other things you find at Whole Foods. He says we bring joy to people with upgraded sweet baked goods. Bring joy to people with upgraded sweet baked goods. Doesn't matter the product, doesn't matter the way, the delivery mechanism. We bring joy to people with upgraded. Right? The more in which we can define ourselves incredibly broadly and narrowly, but not anchor ourselves to the things that about us that are most changeable. Our product, our role. Yeah. That's where we're going to be liberated from feeling disrupted. So anyway, I tell that I have a whole exercise and a thing that I walk corporate clients through, and I'm fascinated to talk to these executives, these seasoned executives, and I walk them through this thing, and then they come up to me afterwards, and they're like, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and here's what I think my thing is, and it's just one of those things that I think we focus so much on what we do every day that we forget what's deeper and down underneath it, and that matters too.
I love that. I mean, I've had this discussion with people before, and I've always said, I mean, I build products and experiences for people, and that's what I've done. I built a brand for 17 years where we design, manufacture boxy martial art equipment. I have a decent portfolio of real estate that's vacation rentals. So it's just experiences and brands, I've other brands that I've sold and built, and it's always related around building a brand or an experience that somebody can relate to or navigate to, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that you said that because it is very, very, very true. This has been awesome. This has been awesome. Where could our audience get your book, get to learn more about you?
So you can get my book anywhere you get books. It's available on audiobook or ebook or
Did
hardcover.
did you do your own audio?
I did do my own audio.
Good,
Yeah,
good,
it
good,
was
good.
it was a blast. 3 days in a studio with a guy yelling pillow talk at me over and over. My director was like, "You got to slow down, too energetic, pillow talk, pillow talk." So you can imagine that if you listen to the audiobook. And yeah, so anywhere you get books, not available in stone tablet, but otherwise available. And then you can find me on social media at Hey Feifer, generally everywhere, or my website is jasonfeifer.com. I have a newsletter as well that you can sign up for there. So all sorts of things. But anyway, the book is called Build for Tomorrow.
I love that. I'm gonna ask you one last question.
Sure.
If something were to happen today in a few words, how would you want to be remembered or described by your loved ones?
Uh so that's interesting. You know, I think by my loved ones very simply, which was to say he was there. Right. Like I was there, that I was there for, I like to be there. I want to make sure that I'm there. I'm there for friends, for family,
Yeah.
for wife, for kids. Like, like I'm there. I'm not absent. I'm there when they need me. Anyway,
You're present. You're present.
yeah, but not just but not just present, but like that I stood up when it mattered, and I did, but it's fine. But I'll give you a different answer for the question that I usually get, which is like, if you had a legacy, what would it be? Like somebody just asked me that, and my answer, I've thought about that a lot because people keep asking me, and the answer is, I would hope that whatever I am remembered for hasn't happened yet. Right. Like, I feel like it's a strange thing to say I'm in the middle of the journey and I've done the defining thing. I sure hope that's not the case.
I love that. I love that. How old are you, Jason?
42.
42. So you're a couple of years younger than me. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was interesting how our discussion was from from 20 to 35. You're just filling out, you're learning, you're falling in love, you're
Yeah.
experimenting, you're building businesses, you're trying new careers. And then 35 to 50 or 45 is that really struggling age where you got so much still to give, and
Mm,
you're still trying to figure out what else to give, and you're still going at, but you go through hardships. I mean, I just lost my dad. Like, you go through hardships where people close to you start passing away, and there's so much different emotions and feelings between 35 to 45 to 50. And then usually once you start figuring yourself out, they said from 50 to 60 is your golden years. That's when you really start striving as an entrepreneur. That's when you really
yeah.
start getting, your life starts settling down. Your children get a little older, like things start happening. So it's interesting that you said that, because it is true. I'm the same. I mean, I've had numerous companies. I've done so many things, and it's like, I think there's so much more of my story that still has to be written. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. At 42, I only have the perspective of a 42-year-old. So the way I've been thinking about it is, I remember in my 20s, I thought my 20s are about setting it up. And then in my 30s, I thought, okay, the 20s were about setting it up. The 30s are about executing it. And then I got to my 40s and I thought, what are my 40s about? I know what my 40s are about. My 40s are now about doing it on my own terms, setting it up, executing it, now doing it on my own terms. So anyway, we'll see where that goes. That's as far as the story I've gotten so far. But we can do another podcast in 10 years, and I'll tell you what I feel about my 50s.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's funny. I love that. I love it that you actually said that, because that's something I've been saying since I was 19, 20. I mean, that was one thing with my parents where, I mean, European family wanted me to have a stable job, stable
Mm-hmm.
career. And I was like, I can't I got to do this shit on my own terms. And I've
Yeah.
always had that mindset, right? So I love those. I love those words. This has been awesome, buddy. This has been
Hey,
awesome. I'm glad you came
super
back. I
fun.
appreciate you coming on. Yeah, our audience is going to get a ton of value out of your amazing storytelling, and I'll put all the links in the bios and all our posts and all that for your book and everything about you. And thank you so much again.
Hey, thank you. This is great. Really appreciate it.